In this Facebook Live, Andrew and I are talking about the perennial men's anger issue. Yes, look, we all experience anger, we all suffer from it, we will experience it's a normal, healthy emotion. Unfortunately, we can overreact. In this Facebook Live, we go through the conversation and we give some pointers to how to recognise what's underneath our anger and to change the pattern of our dynamic. I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. Tonight we're going to be looking at men's anger. We've done quite a few themes over the last 6 weeks. Men's anger, how do we start the ball rolling? Short, sharp, sweet, try and get it over and done with 20 minutes because people people are really busy in their lives, so it's trying to get it all. Anger, it's been a history.
It's a big one, isn't it?
It's
been tackled a few times, but it's always a good one to come back to. So I guess it'd be great to look at what drives men's anger. We're pretty well aware of the problems it's causing. I think most of us are aware of the sort of issues that can arise when men's anger gets out of hand. There's stuff all over the media. It's a very publicised issue. But what's at the heart of men's anger?
Look, I think a lot of the patriarchal society, a lot of that old social conditioning has created a sense of entitlement, power and control issues, the alpha male. The reptilian brain is obviously involved in it, the fight, flight, freeze, food and fornicate. I have no doubt. When you read the research, a lot of the research is suggesting that underneath men's anger is fear.
We hear that a lot, and it seems to ring true. But I wonder what else is at work. Is it as simple as fear, or is there more involved? My sense is there's more involved there.
Yeah, and it's like when we set up expectations, when we have expectations, we all have different ways of thinking. A lot of it's just unfortunate that a lot of the anger, it's not just the women and children. I think men are also on the receiving end of other men's anger. Anger is an emotion, violence is a behaviour. It's where the behaviour is just it's really difficult because in working with men's anger, I now put up all the real stress, annoyed, frustrated, because in anger management they'll say I'm not angry, I'm just frustrated.
Okay.
And is that therefore minimising the extreme, the level of anger?
I guess on one hand, it's good to differentiate between frustration and anger. So, when we're looking at it for ourselves, we're not always labelling ourselves as angry and then responding as though we were angry, but to kind of throw a blanket approach over it and reframe anger simply as frustration could well be missing the point. And beyond anger, we have rage.
Yeah, and that's where that's where the rational, logical mind goes offline.
Yeah.
And we're then really acting out of or reacting out of the reptilian brain, for sure. There's no doubt about that. But it's how do we, so what are we protecting? It's a defensive, and it's not just men. We need to accept that both men and women, when we are in relationships, anger is used by both genders when we're trying to prove a point. I call that proving, I call that, it can potentially move into the poison dart game.
Mm-hmm.
He said, she said, prove, disprove. We're just trying to prove the other person wrong.
Mm.
And our anger does get worked up in trying to do that.
So if we think about that type of anger in relationships, it seems as though it's often about not being understood
Or hurt.
or heard, or feeling hurt.
Or or feeling hurt. You're not hearing
Yeah,
me. You're not understanding
yeah.
that emotional depth that
Mm.
I'm trying to get across. We're both not coping in the world. We've both
Yeah.
got too much going on in this, the digital Bronx world.
Mm.
And our authentic needs, who's meeting them? Oh, you expect me to do this, you expect me to do that. It's quite common.
Mm.
We're both, yeah, and I wonder whether for men we haven't been taught, there is fear there, but it's like on a football field, growing up, are you allowed to show anxiety on a football field?
Well, we don't do that, and maybe that's not the place for it. I don't know.
So what are we
But then
going to put in place?
yeah, look, I just wonder if we take it back to relationships, and you're talking about something pretty tricky there, which is when we're both individuals in a relationship having that experience of I feel vulnerable, I feel hurt, I feel unheard. And that's happening on both sides, and that's polarizing into anger. What on earth are we supposed to do? How do we solve that? That's tricky. Who's looking after things? How do we care for ourselves and for the other when we have a great deal of vulnerability, when things are really raw and things aren't going so good, and that's happening for the other person?
I like the Tara Brach. She always says to have a sacred pause
Yep.
instead of trying to intellectually think about the next point to prove the person wrong, or
Yeah.
is to pause and to connect to what's the deeper feeling that's underneath the anger.
Yeah. Is this then about allowing each party to be vulnerable and to share that vulnerability and to let go of a need for someone to be looking after the other and simply just to be together? Is that the way through?
That's a really good question, and I'm wondering, just as you're sharing that, in that vulnerability, how much fear, who's going to take the lead? How much fear to meet that authentic need? Who's going to step out of their zone first? And generally, it's women that have been socially conditioned to do that a lot.
Mm.
And men have got that sense of entitlement from the patriarchal history. And yeah, look, I haven't been, it's only in the last few years that I've really got to learn to recognise my anger. It's,
Mm.
yeah, I think that was conditioned growing up
Mm.
in family stuff.
Mm.
But I think there's a lot of underlying stuff that, yeah, just that not being heard or not being understood, not being on the same page. You're just not getting it. Nobody's getting it. And it's a really, to sit with that
Mm.
vulnerability of not being heard, just they're missing my ouch.
Mm.
And it takes a lot of breathing to to draw in or to witness
Yeah.
a side of myself being angry, wanting to react with anger.
Mm.
It takes a lot of, it's been a lot of practice.
Mm. You mentioned a lot of breathing. Is it meditation perhaps that's helped you to be present to those sort of feelings and not act from them? Or is it something else that's been really useful in, because it sounds like a fierce discipline to sit with that vulnerability and not allow the anger to start running the show.
I think the meditation, serious practice over the last 5 years has really significantly helped be able
Yep.
to witness the irritability,
Yeah.
to witness, hey, I've had a long day, not in a, life's not as joyous as I want it because you've got to front up for the next day and prepare for the...
Yeah. We all know that feeling.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like, just, so there's it could be a slight irritability in there, but just observing that and just being really mindful that that's there. So just be careful with tone of voice, be careful with reaction, try and centre.
So you're being mindful about how you present to the other person to avoid things getting, out of hand or escalating. But I'm also picking up a kind of a kindness towards yourself.
Yeah, there's a noticing energy levels.
Yep.
Just being really aware of and trying to just be mindful of tone of voice, reactions. I might be a little bit more sensitive to others' tone of voice.
Yep.
If I'm not mindful, I can then see that as experience that or put the lens of criticism on. And I'm wondering whether for a lot of men that because we don't always have that inside. Our conditioning is fairly much right and wrong, black, white.
And take action.
And take action and
Yeah.
want to get the problem fixed. And we'll fix it this way, not your way. Whether that then comes back to some of that stuff of entitlement that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So some of the tools I'm picking up on here are some good self-talk, a bit of self-awareness, kindness towards ourselves. So thinking through, but with heart, things like, it's been a tough day, I could be a bit sensitive, I need to be aware of that, I need to know when I could be more likely to kind of react and get snappy and want to fix things. And then there's a real self-discipline that needs to come into the mix, which is I'm just going to hold myself back a bit. I'm going to notice how I'm talking, and I'm going to put a bit of conscious effort into this. So it's not a magic bullet, is it?
No, it's not a magic bullet. And I wonder for a lot of men just shut down. They, rather than communicate, they'll just shut it all down. And in the exploration with them, in the shutdown, they are angry, but they don't trust their anger.
Yeah.
So therefore, just shut it down, close it down. So there is, it's not pure self-care, but they're just, again, in a way, are they being mindful that if they offload, then the anger could be explosive.
Yeah. Look, that is self-care, and that is mindfulness. It's perhaps not the whole answer, but it's a great starting point, because I'm hearing that's about men recognising things could go badly or be taken badly, or people could be hurt, and so they're doing their best to take a different course of action. So that's taking strength and determination to do that. But then, what's the next step? If it becomes stonewalling, brooding, giving off a heavy vibe, okay, that's definitely better than exploding. But it's not really creating connection either, is it?
No, it's not creating connection. And two, when men are shutting down, women, they don't want them to shut down. They would like to have some sort of dialogue around what's really going on.
Yeah.
And because we've had a history of converting the vulnerability, into a defensive reaction to vulnerability, I can't show that side of myself. My world order is, well, your world order is impacting on my world order, and whose world, this is how my world order works, at the behest of their world order, and that can then be deemed as the traditional power and control stuff, where then whose world order. It's a really interesting conversation. It's really difficult to try and dissect it. But whose world order is right? For me, my world order works for my brain and my way.
Oh, yeah. We all think ours is kind of right to an extent, but of course no one's right.
Yeah, that's right. And it's how do we look underneath? What's really fueling the anger? What's really fueling the annoyance? And it's how do we get into a different space where we can have a conversation around the different idiosyncrasies that are arising, what needs are not getting met, how do we help each other recognise what those needs are.
Is this where we need to ask ourselves questions like, shit, I'm getting really dogmatic here and I'm trying to prove my point and things aren't working. Actually, what's my fear? What's my worry? What's my concern? What's my unmet need? So introjecting, looking within a bit, and then communicating around that.
Would you take a time out first to give yourself that space to allow the anger to dissipate somewhat before?
If I was to answer that personally, I'd have to say because I might not be able to get to it straight away. I know when I think I'm right, and that can take a little bit of time to look below that and see what's churning away. So definitely 5 minutes time out is a good thing.
And this is the hard part about trying to have that conversation about what's underneath the anger, those emotions or feelings, whatever they might be. Because as you talked before about, underneath the anger can be a vulnerability, I'm not coping, you're putting more, I'm experiencing more pressure having to do this or that.
Yep.
And also trying to have that dialogue around those deeper emotions. The cognitive language that we have may not necessarily be accurate enough to describe them. And I'm wondering, whether we try and get a little bit, everybody tries to intellectualize and sort of cognitively concrete what that feeling might be, when we need to just have an open-hearted conversation about what those feelings could be. There's no right or wrong in feelings. They're all different.
Yeah.
And it's how do we come back into a healthy dialogue without the anger. But as soon as we start getting into, what it could be this, it feels like it's that, well, then, how do we then put some guidelines around, particularly for men, that, we are very, not every, it's being generalistic, but a lot of men, we convert straight away pretty quickly to frustration if our point of view is not getting heard, and I'm wondering whether that's something that's got to change, and how do we stop? How do we make that time out go away, but then come back to, don't stonewall it, come back to, don't sweep the subject under the table, under the carpet, come back and try and have some ownership about what is really happening, and there's no right or wrong in it. How do we take the judgments, the criticisms, and I think both people need to do that in an argument. It's I like those times where people come back afterwards and have the hard talks, and there's a different ownership, there's a different there's a different dynamic in there rather than that.
Yeah.
And then when there's that different dynamic, I think that's when we're each going to be heard.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can always try to use assertive language, assertive communication skills. If that's going out the window, time out, absolutely. Guidelines, how do we figure out what's going on within? How do we get to the heart of the matter? Because sometimes we could be a million miles away from that. And the good old downward arrow technique can be a good one. The downward arrow technique, for those that are not familiar with it, is, all right, my partner's not listening to me. Okay, so what does that mean? And that's the downward arrow. So what does that mean for me? Well, they're not going to understand what I'm trying to say. So what does that mean for me? Well, I'm not going to get what I want out of this situation. Okay, so if I don't get what I want, what does that mean? And we can keep asking that question, and that will take us further and further. I find for myself, I may have to ask that question 6, 7, 8 times to get to the heart of it. But that can be a good way just to kind of keep going back in and going back in until I get a felt sense around what's happening for me. So it's like using the head to just orient back into the feelings.
And to, there's you could go on for an hour in this, I think. Just being mindful of time, wanting to shorten the conversations to 20 minutes.
Yep.
I'm wondering where a lot of the reactions that we are having in the here and now are not just in the here and now. They've got a deep emotional thread into, what's the meaning in here for me? Where does that meaning come from? If I haven't been heard today, it could, part of that reaction, that angry reaction, be a thread back to not being listened to early in life, and that's when the mind and the brain is set up that default reaction, in protection of that old history, even though the old history is not necessarily playing itself out today. So just in drawing tonight to a close, what are the main points that you think we need to finish with?
Look, I think you make a very good point there. When we react, we're acting out the past, and so often the situations that we're in feel a lot like situations that have happened to us before. And that's really the key question. When have I felt like this before? And then when we get that aha moment, that can be a really great way to sort of dispel a lot of the tension that we're feeling with another person, and really free us up to communicate more freely about what we need now in our adult lives, rather than coming from perhaps a hurt place that's been with us for a long time, possibly childhood.
Yeah, and that hurt place is something that that hurt place is a vulnerability, and that's something that we men do need to do a little bit more self-development around, a bit more deeper exploration. Is how do I manage that? How do I meet that within myself rather than reacting it out?
Absolutely.
And then come back to have a conversation and own, oh yeah, look, sorry, I've reacted. Yeah, this reaction is coming from an old history, etc., etc. Because that's how they say that the brain does interpret this stuff, and we do default to particular reactions.
Yeah.
And I think anger is a very common defaulting emotion, or that men do. We've been conditioned to respond to that rather than emote it. We convert it into a defensive, angry reaction. We have to armour up going through school. We can't show anxiety on the football field. We can't show it in the classroom because we'd be bullied. There's fear around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, mate, shall we continue this one next? There's a lot in this, I think.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's continue it next week.
Sounds good.
All right,
Good
talk
talking
soon.
to you.
Good, ditto. Cheers, mate. Okay, I hope you got something from this Facebook Live. Please do us a favour, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and share it with friends, particularly mates that you know have got a few anger issues going on in there. Cheers for now. Thanks, guys.